Hey Reddit, throwaway account here because, well, this story is just too wild. For some context, I'm a 19-year-old guy. My mom recently remarried a guy named John, who's honestly been a decent stepdad so far. No drama. No awkwardness. It was a smooth transition into our blended family. John has this sister, Emily, who's 31. She's single, works in marketing, and is basically the life of every party. At first, Emily was just the fun aunt figure. She'd crack jokes, bring over snacks, and keep things lively during family dinners. I never thought much of her attention toward me. I figured she was just being friendly since I was new to the dynamic. That changed about 3 weeks ago when the comments started. It was subtle at first. Things like, "Wow, you're really growing into yourself, huh?" Or, "You must have girls all over you with a smile like that." I didn't think too much about it until the compliments became more personal. She'd comment on my build, how my t-shirt fit, or even the energy I brought to a room. The real shift happened at a barbecue John hosted. Emily came over wearing a dress that, well, let's just say it wasn't the usual casual family attire. She stuck close to me the whole evening, asking about college, hobbies, and even if I had a girlfriend. At one point, she leaned in and said, "You've got such a mature vibe for your age. It's refreshing." I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was just her being her usual flirty self. But then she followed it up with a lingering touch on my arm. That's when it hit me. This wasn't harmless teasing. It was intentional. The next day, she'd met me on Instagram, which wasn't that weird at first. She shared a meme about stepfamilies, but then she started liking old photos on my profile, going back months. Her messages quickly shifted from casual to suggestive. She commented on a gym selfie I'd posted last year, saying, "If only my trainer looked like this, I'd never miss a workout." I didn't know how to respond, so I left her on read. After ignoring Emily's DMs, I hoped the weirdness would die down. But no, if anything, she doubled down. The following weekend, she showed up at our house unannounced while John and my mom were out running errands. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when she walked in, casually dressed in leggings and a cropped hoodie. "Hey you," she said, her tone way too familiar. "Didn't know I'd get the house to myself with you today." I laughed nervously, trying to keep things light. "Yeah, just killing time until they get back." Emily leaned against the counter, too close for comfort. "It's nice, though. We never really get a chance to talk one-on-one." She gave me this look, like she wasn't talking about family catch-ups. She reached over, pretending to inspect the sandwich I was making, but her hand brushed against mine. "You know," she said softly, "it's kind of funny. You're not really my nephew, so it's not like there are rules here." My stomach dropped. I was stunned, trying to process what she just said. Before I could respond, she added, "Relax. I'm just teasing." But her smirk said otherwise. I awkwardly excused myself, heading straight to my room. My heart was pounding. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, like she was testing the waters. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering if I should tell someone. But who? John? My mom? Both options felt impossible. I mean, what was I supposed to say? "Hey John, your sister's hitting on me." I didn't want to start drama, especially not in a family that had only just begun to feel stable. And if I told my mom, there was no guarantee she'd believe me? Or worse, what if she thought I'd misread the situation? On the other hand, staying quiet felt wrong. Emily wasn't just being inappropriate. She was actively trying to blur boundaries. And the kicker? I couldn't deny that a part of me was intrigued. She was gorgeous, confident in a way that most girls my age weren't. I hated myself for even thinking about it. This was my stepfamily. But technically, we weren't related, right? The whole thing was messing with my head. The next morning, Emily sent me a text. "Hope I didn't scare you off yesterday, winky face." I stared at it for a long time. My gut told me to shut this down immediately. But my curiosity, mixed with the fact that she was undeniably attractive, made me hesitate. After all, she wasn't backing off. And if I was being honest with myself, part of me didn't want her to. After staring at Emily's text for what felt like forever, I finally replied with something neutral. "It's cool. No worries." I figured that would end the conversation, but of course it didn't. She texted back almost immediately, "Good. Smiley face. I'd hate to think I made you uncomfortable. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But later that day, she posted an Instagram story. A selfie with the caption, "Feeling cute, might delete later, winky face." It was her in a low-cut top, looking straight at the camera with that same smirk she'd given me in the kitchen. I couldn't help myself. I watched the story, and seconds later, she messaged me, "Caught you looking eyes." This was the moment I should have blocked her, shut everything down, and pretended it never happened. But I didn't. Instead, I replied, "You posted it for people to look, didn't you?" Her response came quickly, "Not everyone, just the right people." And just like that, I was hooked. The next few days were a whirlwind of DMs and accidental run-ins. Emily would message me late at night, dropping little comments about how mature I was or how easy it was to talk to me. She'd send selfies, nothing explicit, but suggestive enough to blur the lines. At one point, she mentioned needing help with something at her apartment. "It's just some heavy boxes," she said. "You're strong. You could handle it." I knew it was a bad idea, but I agreed. When I showed up, she was wearing leggings and an oversized sweater that somehow managed to look both casual and calculated. As we moved the boxes, she kept finding excuses to brush against me, complimenting my strength and joking about how she should hire me as her personal trainer. At one point, she handed me a water bottle, her fingers lingering on mine just a little too long. After we finished, she insisted I stay for a drink. "You've earned it," she said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. Sitting on her couch, the tension was almost unbearable. She leaned in, her voice low. "You know, you're not like other guys your age. You're different." I couldn't tell if it was the wine or the way she was looking at me, but I found myself leaning closer. "Emily, this is..." I started, but she cut me off. "This doesn't have to be a big deal," she said. "We're both adults, right?" My brain was screaming at me to stop, to leave, to do literally anything but what I was about to do. But instead, I stayed. Emily didn't wait for me to answer her question. She leaned in, closing the gap between us, and kissed me. For a split second, I froze, my heart racing. Every logical part of me screamed to pull away, to walk out of that apartment and never look back. But I didn't. I kissed her back. It was electric, like something out of a movie. She pulled me closer, and before I knew it, we were tangled together on her couch. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this was wrong, but it felt impossible to stop. Afterward, we sat in silence for a while, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Emily broke the silence first. "So, you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but confident. I nodded, still trying to process everything. "Yeah, this is crazy." She smiled, brushing a hand through her hair. "Crazy isn't always a bad thing, you know?" She didn't seem the least bit conflicted, which somehow made it easier for me to justify what had happened. Technically, we weren't related, and it wasn't like we were hurting anyone, as long as no one found out. After that night, things escalated quickly. Emily and I agreed to keep everything between us. "No one would understand," she said, and she was right. The thought of John or my mom finding out was terrifying. We started texting constantly, finding excuses to see each other. She'd swing by the house when she knew John and my mom were out, or I'd come up with reasons to help her with errands. Every moment we spent together felt like walking a tightrope, thrilling, dangerous, and completely addictive. One afternoon, while we were alone at her apartment, I asked her, "Why me? You could have anyone." She laughed softly, running her fingers along my arm. "That's exactly why. You're not like anyone else. You're real and you don't play games." That's refreshing. It felt good to hear, even though I knew it shouldn't. I wasn't used to someone like her. Confident, gorgeous, and completely unapologetic. Choosing me. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to keep things hidden. She started getting bolder, texting me late at night while my mom and John were in the next room, or brushing against me a little too obviously during family dinners. At one point, she even joked, "Do you think they'd notice if I stole you for the weekend?" It was thrilling, but the closer we got, the more reckless it all felt. I started to wonder how long we could keep this up before someone noticed, or before everything came crashing down. It was only a matter of time before our secret came dangerously close to unraveling. One Saturday afternoon, John decided to organize a family outing to a nearby park. Emily was, of course, invited. I couldn't decide if I was relieved or nervous. Relieved because it gave us a chance to see each other, or nervous because I knew how risky it was. At the park, Emily didn't hold back. Every glance, every touch, was charged with a hidden meaning. When no one was looking, she'd brush her hand against mine or lean in close to whisper something just loud enough for me to hear. At one point, John turned to me. "Hey, can you help Emily carry the cooler back to the car?" "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. As soon as we were out of sight, Emily smirked. "You're getting better at keeping your cool." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, well, maybe you could stop making it so hard." She laughed, leaning in closer. "Where's the fun in that?" Before I could respond, I heard footsteps behind us. My mom's voice rang out. "What's taking you two so long?" We jumped apart, my heart pounding as I turned to see her standing a few feet away, hands on her hips. She didn't look suspicious, just annoyed. "Sorry, the cooler's heavier than it looks," Emily said smoothly, flashing her usual charming smile. My mom sighed. "Well, hurry up. John's waiting to start the grill." That night, I couldn't shake the fear of how close we'd come to getting caught. It was a reminder that no matter how thrilling this was, it was also incredibly risky. Despite the close call, Emily didn't slow down. If anything, she became bolder. One evening, she showed up at the house unexpectedly while John and my mom were at a work event. "I couldn't stay away," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Emily, this is getting risky," I said, but my resolve wavered the moment she smiled. She leaned against the counter, looking at me with those piercing eyes. "I like risks, don't you?" We ended up in my room, completely lost in the moment. But just as things were heating up, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. My mom's voice echoed through the house. "We're home." Panic set in. Emily scrambled to adjust her clothes, while I tried to act casual. She slipped out the back door just as my mom walked into the kitchen. "You okay?" she asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "Yeah, just tired," I said, forcing a yawn. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized how unsustainable this had become. Emily and I were playing with fire, and it was only a matter of time before we got burned. After the close call, I tried to create some distance between Emily and me, but she wasn't having it. She sent me a text the next day. "Don't tell me you're scared now." I ignored it, hoping she'd take the hint. A few hours later, another message came through. "We're good at keeping secrets. Don't overthink this." I wanted to believe her, but the constant anxiety of being caught was starting to take a toll. I felt like I was living a double life, hiding something explosive right under my family's nose. Things came to a head during a family dinner the following weekend. Emily had been quiet all evening, which should have put me at ease, but instead it made me uneasy. As we were cleaning up, Emily cornered me in the hallway. "We need to talk," she said in a low voice. "Not here," I hissed, glancing nervously toward the kitchen. "Fine," she said, her tone sharp. "Tomorrow. My place. Don't flake." The next day, I reluctantly went to her apartment. She didn't waste any time. "What's going on with you?" she demanded. "You've been avoiding me." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Emily, this is getting too risky. My mom almost caught us. John could find out any day. It's not worth it." She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine. "Don't pretend you don't want this as much as I do." I didn't know what to say. She was right. Despite all my reservations, I couldn't deny how much I wanted her. "You're overthinking everything," she continued. "We're not hurting anyone. We're just enjoying each other." Her confidence was intoxicating, but it also scared me. How could she be so sure this wouldn't blow up in our faces? For a while, I tried to convince myself that Emily was right, that we could keep this secret forever. But the guilt and stress were becoming unbearable. Every time I saw John or my mom, I felt like a ticking time bomb. Emily, on the other hand, seemed completely unfazed. If anything, she was growing more attached. She started dropping hints about wanting to spend more time together, even suggesting we go away for a weekend. That's when I knew I had to make a decision. One night I told her we needed to talk. She looked amused at first, like she thought I was about to confess my undying love. But when I told her I couldn't keep doing this, her expression darkened. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice icy. "Yes," I said firmly. "This has gone too far. I can't keep lying to my family." Her eyes narrowed. "So that's it? You're just going to walk away?" "I have to," I said, though my chest tightened at the thought. For a moment, she just stared at me. Her jaw clenched. Then she laughed. A cold, humorless sound. "You think it's that simple?" she said. "You think you can just end this and go back to your little family dinners like nothing happened?" Her words sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't just upset. She was furious. And something about the way she looked at me made me realize this wasn't over. I thought ending things with Emily would bring me some peace. Instead, it did the opposite. The day after our conversation, Emily went radio silent. No texts, no accidental run-ins, nothing. At first, I was relieved. Maybe she'd taken the hint and moved on. But the quiet didn't last long. A few days later, during another family dinner, Emily showed up uninvited. She waltzed in like nothing was wrong, bringing a bottle of wine as a peace offering for my mom. I tried to avoid her, but she kept finding excuses to be near me, reaching past me to grab plates, brushing her hand against mine, even sitting directly across from me at the table. Then she did something I wasn't prepared for. As we were clearing the dishes, she turned to my mom and said, "You know, your son is such a sweetheart. He came by to help me the other day with some errands. I don't know what I'd do without him." My mom's face lit up. "That's so kind of you, honey," she said, looking at me with pride. I forced a smile, trying to keep my expression neutral. Meanwhile, Emily's eyes sparkled with mischief. After dinner, she cornered me in the hallway. "See? I'm not as bad as you think," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed, keeping my voice low. "Just reminding you that we're connected," she said, leaning in closer. "You can't just walk away from me and pretend nothing happened." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. "You're playing a dangerous game, Emily." She smiled, unfazed. "Maybe, but you're in it too." The worst part? She was right. As much as I wanted to cut ties, Emily wasn't going to let me go that easily. Emily's games were becoming unbearable. I tried to avoid her, but she always found a way to make her presence known. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to do something that would blow everything wide open. Then it happened. One evening, my mom announced she wanted to have a family meeting. She said it casually, but something in her tone made my stomach drop. Emily showed up, of course, looking calm and collected as if she didn't have a care in the world. We all gathered in the living room, me, my mom, John, and Emily. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. "I've been noticing some tension lately," my mom began, glancing around the room. "And I think it's important that we're all honest with each other." I froze. Was this it? Did she know? John nodded, oblivious to the storm brewing under the surface. "That's a good idea. It's important to keep the family strong." Before I could say anything, Emily chimed in. "I agree. Honesty is so important." She shot me a sly smile, and my heart sank. Then she dropped the bombshell. "Actually," she said, her voice calm but loaded with implication, "there's something I've been meaning to talk about." Everyone turned to look at her, including me. I could feel the blood draining from my face. "What is it, Emily?" John asked, clearly confused. She hesitated, her eyes flicking to me for the briefest moment before she said, "It's nothing serious. I just wanted to thank your son for being such a great help to me recently. He's really gone above and beyond." John smiled, clearly proud. My mom looked at me with the same expression. But then Emily added, "In fact, he's been so attentive that I'm starting to think he's the most caring man in this family." The room went silent. Her words hung in the air like a loaded gun. John frowned, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. Emily shrugged, her smile never faltering. "Just that he's been really supportive lately. I appreciate it." I wanted to scream. She was playing her game so carefully, dropping hints without giving anything away. But I could see the gears turning in John's head, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he started asking questions. That night, I barely slept. Emily had taken things to a whole new level, and I had no idea how to stop her without exposing everything. The tension Emily had created didn't just linger, it grew. Over the next few days, John started acting differently. He wasn't outright confrontational, but his glances lingered a little too long. His questions carried an edge, and I could tell he was trying to piece something together. Then it all came crashing down. It was a Thursday evening. I was in my room when I heard raised voices coming from the living room. At first, I couldn't make out what was being said, but as I got closer to the door, I realized it was John and Emily arguing. "You're being ridiculous," Emily said, her voice sharp. "And you're not telling me everything," John shot back. "You've been acting strange, and so has he." My heart sank. I knew exactly who he was. I crept closer, staying just out of sight. "What are you accusing me of?" Emily asked, her tone shifting to something more defensive. "I'm not sure yet," John admitted, his voice low and menacing. "But I'm going to find out." At that moment, my mom walked in. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tension. John turned to her, his face a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Something's going on between Emily and your son," he said. My mom's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice wavered ever so slightly. Emily, to my horror, didn't deny it outright. Instead, she smirked and said, "Maybe you should ask him." That was it. The thin veil of secrecy was gone, and I knew I couldn't avoid the confrontation any longer. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding. "Look," I said, my voice shaking. "It's not what you think." John's eyes narrowed. "Then what is it?" I stumbled over my words, trying to explain without making things worse, but Emily cut me off. "It's not his fault," she said, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. "I'm the one who pushed things." My mom's face turned pale, and John looked like he was ready to explode. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, his voice rising. "In my own family?" The argument that followed was a blur. My mom was crying, John was yelling, and Emily just stood there, calm as ever, as if she hadn't just destroyed everything. In the end, Emily packed her things and left, but the damage was done. John barely spoke to me after that night, and my mom was caught between defending me and dealing with the fallout of her husband's anger. As for me, I was left to pick up the pieces of the mess Emily and I had created. Looking back, I still don't know what drove me to let it go as far as it did. All I know is that it's a chapter of my life I'll never forget, and one I'll spend a long time trying to move past.